Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Completionist. For this episode, guys, I'm going to do another episode of a completionist point of view. The last episode that I did over the summer, was met with a lot of praise, so I really wanted to keep doing this series because a lot of people are really generally interested, in my opinion, on a variety of different video game topics. So I thought I would continue, answering some of the questions, people had for me when I was starting to plan out that series. So before I get started, guys, I just want to say thanks to each and every one of you, for still staying subscribed to my channel. I know that I can't make videos as often as what I used to, but I'm home over the Christmas holidays for about 3 weeks, so I decided, to take this time and actually get some episodes filmed before I have to head back to Alberta in early January. So the topic that I wanted to talk about, guys, is something that I'm sure every gamer has probably seen, especially over the holiday season. And I'm sure it's something that, we read about, we've seen a lot of reports on the television about. And it was actually a question posed by one of the people that have been subscribed to my channel for a really long time. And that subscriber is an unknown goddess. Her and her son, Hybrid Angel Zero, have actually been subscribed to my channel for a really long time. And she posed a really interesting question, when I was talking about doing this series to begin with. So I thought, this would be a perfect time of the year, to actually talk about it. Now, the question that she asked was, she wanted to know how I felt, how first-person shooter games influenced kids under the age of 15 years old, especially the first-person shooter games that have been released in the last couple of years. Most notably, I guess, Battlefield and Call of Duty and Gears of War and games along those lines. So, before I get started on the topic, guys, one thing I want to make perfectly clear is that I am not a parent. I have no plans in having kids. I can't really see myself being a parent anytime soon. It's a choice that, me and my wife have talked about quite a lot, and for right now we're not interested in having kids at all. And another thing that I want to make perfectly clear is that the fact that I don't have any children is that I am not going to be that person that is going to tell anybody how they should raise their kid. Because I'm sure a lot of parents have dealt with these kind of people that everybody seems to know that there's the one universal true approach, to raise a child. And I simply don't believe that because, different parents are going to have different ways of parenting. And in the end, you kind of got to respect that because in a way, all kids are different. Now, with regards to the topic at hand, listen, it's a topic that, we've seen in the news quite a lot. And for me, seeing all the studies and seeing all the reports, about the effect of violent video games on young kids, my simple answer to the question is that I don't believe that violent media makes bad kids. I believe that bad parenting is what makes bad kids. The only reason why I say that is because I'm trying to use my example of being a child, because I was a child of the 1980s. And being a child in the 1980s, I guess parental restrictions, especially pushed on by the media, were pretty much non-existent. I remember, growing up, and even below the ages of 10 years old, I was watching violent action movies all the time. And my dad never had an issue with it. I remember, being 7 and 8 years old and I was watching Commando with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And that movie has an incredibly high death count like you wouldn't believe. And there was even another year that I watched RoboCop, the original, when I was 10 years old. And for anybody who watches that movie right now, that movie is very violent. That is like a hard rated R movie. And yet I watched it and I enjoyed it, and if I look at myself right now, I turned out just fine. I'm not overly aggressive, or, you don't see me going out and, committing crimes and, shooting people. And I think the same rule applies to this day and age. Now, obviously, are video games a lot more violent now than what they were 20 or 30 years ago? Of course they are. Are movies a lot more violent than what they were 20 or 30 years ago? Of course they are. But I think the biggest thing that, you need to take into consideration is that every child is going to mature differently. And you as a parent have to decide, if you feel that your child is mature enough to actually handle the content that is put towards them. Now, I'm not saying that, you should go out and buy Manhunt, for your 5-year-old so he can learn how to choke a bitch. No, absolutely not. But one thing that I've personally seen is that, listen, from how I see things and just, knowing a lot of parents, the more you restrict the child from doing something, the more likely that they're just going to find some way of doing it anyway. And, I'd rather know and actually be there and actually know what my child is playing and what my child is watching than just flat out restricting everything from them. Because every child is going to have a friend, or is going to have somebody that is going to have something that they wanted to try that they couldn't try themselves. We've all done it. If our parents wouldn't let us do something, we would find a way to do it. My parents didn't like me watching slasher movies, when I was a kid. But, when I was 10 or 11 years old, I had a 14, 15-year-old cousin that, I used to watch slasher movies with all the time. Now, it used to give me horrible nightmares. And when I was like 13 or 14, 15 years old, I didn't like watching scary movies. But after that, I kind of got over it. It's like I said before, you have to judge, on a kid's personality and a kid's maturity level as well, to see if they can handle the content that is presented to them. Now, when it comes, to the first-person shooter genre right now, I'll be the first one to admit, I'm not a first-person shooter player. The only first-person shooter games I've ever played was like Wolfenstein and Doom, and I think the last first-person shooter game I played was GoldenEye for the N64. If your kid really wants to play a first-person shooter, in all honesty, I wouldn't start them playing a first-person shooter where it's people killing other people. Because, when you watch your child play a game like that, you have to let them know that, it's make-believe, it's not real. It's fantasy. And these are just, computer-controlled players. But in all honesty, if I was a parent, I wouldn't start my child playing a first-person shooter in which, it's people killing other people. It would probably be, a person killing a robot or an alien or something along those lines. I wish I could provide perfect examples of that, but since I'm not a first-person shooter fan, I don't know what games would cater to that, besides Halo or like anything along those lines. But the thing is that, listen, as a parent, you cannot blindly just pick out a game that your child wants and just give it to them and let them play it completely unsupervised. Because listen, a lot of parents right now, we grew up playing video games, and maybe we can relate and we can understand playing games that we wanted to play as a child that our parents didn't really want us playing. Because I think when you pick out a video game for your kid to play, regardless of how old your kid is, regardless if he's 5, 10, 13, 15 years old, you have to owe it to yourself, to do the research. You can't just simply ask your kid, what game do you want? Simply buy the game and just let them play it unsupervised. Do your research. These days, access to information is incredibly easy. if your kid picks out a game, you can watch videos on that game. You can do research on that game. You can see how violent the game is, or if the game has a lot of swearing, or if it has nudity, or like anything along those lines. But I think one thing I would like to see parents do more often, especially when it comes to their kids playing video games nowadays, is that I would love to see the parents play the games with them, because that way you get to see the game yourself, and the child is not only fixated on the game, but you're actually having an experience with the child. And then when you watch your kid play that game, then you can assess yourself. If you feel that your child is mature enough to actually handle it. Because listen, it's as I said before. Listen, there have been countless studies, and there's a great episode of Violence in Video Games and Kids on Penn and Teller's show called Bullshit, and it really relays some really excellent points. And it just goes back to say, I don't think violent media makes violent kids. I think it's a lack of parenting, it's a lack of supervision, and anything along those lines. Because guess what? When your kid starts to become a teenager, he's going to be watching more violent movies. There's going to be like things that's going to appeal to that child, and they're going to find some way of actually expressing themselves, or actually be different, or to kind of diverse themselves, from the crowd. And you can restrict them from doing that, but in all honesty, all it's going to do is it's going to cause the child to rebel, and rebel hard. And in all honesty, if I was a parent, I would rather be a parent that would try to treat my kid as an adult with more responsibilities as he gets older. And be welcoming to any changes in lifestyle, or once he or she tries to discover the things that they're into. Because more than anything, I think what a child needs in their life is support and encouragement. And I think they need a sense of realism as well. Because listen, as much as a lot of us would like to believe that the world is a nice place and everything is going to be happy and everything is going to be great all the time, it's not. And I think, it's a person's responsibility as a parent, to provide a child, with the rules and the life lessons to prepare them for any situation that comes their way with regards, if it's positive or negative in nature. When it comes to the first-person shooter genre, every child is going to be different, and every parent is going to be different. But there's no universal way to go about influencing your child to first-person shooters. You just have to judge it on an individual basis. Because listen, as gamers, we have seen this happen all the time. We have walked into EB Games and GameStop, and we have seen parents pick out a copy of Grand Theft Auto 4, Grand Theft Auto 5, for their 8 or 9-year-old, and not knowing what the game is. And the kid picked it out just because it's what their friends are playing, or it's a game that they've seen on TV, or like anything along those lines. And in all honesty, Grand Theft Auto 5 is a game that I don't think any kid below the age of like 13, 14, 15 should be playing. But in the end, that's up to the parent. And I am not going to be that person to tell a parent, what they should, influence their kid, or, what they want to show to them. But as a parent, with regards to whatever you do, you have to accept responsibilities of your actions, regardless if it's positive or negative in nature. So going back to the first-person shooter genre, in all honesty, when it comes to buying a first-person shooter game for your kid, all I ask for every parent to do is do your research. Know the type of game that your child wants. Know what kind of content is offered in the game. If you feel that your child is old enough and mature enough to handle it, then by all means buy it. But more importantly, I think you should play the game with your kid, so you can see firsthand you know, how your kid reacts to the game, if the game scares the child, or, you know, causes a more aggressive personality or anything along those lines. But listen, we have seen, you know, countless studies on this. You know, I was literally a teenager, like 13, 14 years old, you know, when Mortal Kombat and Mortal Kombat 2 came out. And, you know, these were the games, as well as many others, you know, Night Trap, that caused, you know, the video game ratings board. But, you know, you don't see all of us who grew up playing those games, you know, be mass murderers or anything along those lines. Now, can these games desensitize us to violence? Maybe. But I'm 33 years old right now. You know, I can handle violent action games, and I'm a really big horror movie fan, and I'm a really big slasher movie fan. But believe it or not, even me as an adult, even I have limits. There are certain scenes in horror movies that I can't handle. Like the best example I can give you, and I just want to give people a fair warning, because this is not for the faint at heart. I watched a slasher film when I was like 19, 20 years old, and it was called Ghost Ship. And there's a massacre scene at the very beginning of that movie that still makes me sick to this day. I can't watch the scene anymore, because every time I watch it, it still turns my stomach. It makes me sick every time I see it. And for my fellow slasher movie fans, they probably know the exact scene I'm talking about. So, you know, we're not all invincible, you know, to violence and blood and gore, regardless if we're a child or if we're an adult. But in closing, guys, I think, you know, if you're a parent and, you know, if your kids play video games, it is up to you to be responsible and know exactly the type of game that you are buying for your child. If you feel that your child can handle it, then by all means play it. Because eventually, you know, as your kid gets older, they're going to be exposed to, they could possibly be exposed to more violence and anything along those lines. And if you restrict these things, they're just going to find some other way to play it. If it's with a friend or a relative or anything along those lines. So all I ask is, you know, be smart, be responsible, and more importantly, play the game with your child. So you know firsthand, you know, what your child is actually playing. So anyway, guys, I sincerely hope you liked my opinions about that subject. And thanks for watching another episode of The Completionist. I'm going to be doing more of these A Completionist Point of View episodes. So anyway, guys, take care, and I wish you nothing but the best.